Hey there you guys, welcome back to my channel, and today with the Final Fantasy TCG I wanted to bring you a way of evolving the FF10 starter deck if you guys haven't already had time to play with it, or you just have a few boosters that you kind of want to add something to. And this deck list is something that you want to build that doesn't have too many rares or legendary cards in it, so it should be relatively easy for you guys to build from day one. And then at the end of the video, I'm also going to link you guys to a video that I think would be the final evolution of this deck. And it's not actually by me this time round. The FF7 deck I built for myself, and it's slightly different, but in all fairness, the guys over at Six Sages did pretty much exactly what I would do with a Wind Water deck. So I'm just going to leave a link to their video at the description box, and you should check their video out because it's really, really good, and the deck that they've built, it's pretty dead on actually. I found the Final Fantasy X deck to be the hardest to build with next to no legendaries and heroes. I mean, there's still only 4 hero cards in this deck, so it still should be relatively easy for you to build. But the main thing that I noticed with the FF10 deck out of the box when playing it against the other two is that if you don't get a Yuna out in one way or another, your deck loses. End of story. There's so many cards in the starter deck that rely heavily on her being out, which includes Tidus, Riku, Pain. There's just a lot that needs to happen before, after Yuna hits the field, and the deck can't really go off until she's there. So I've edited the deck to kind of cater to that a little bit, and still keep it on the down low, and I'll still keep it budget based. But I do think that it's maybe worth bearing in mind that if you want a deck that's really simple and easy to play, that the FF10 deck might not be the first thing that you should go for. The FF7 deck I would probably recommend higher for somebody who's literally just getting into the game and wants something just to play that wins, because it does that very well. That said, this deck has 20 forwards, 20 backups, and 10 summons. So the summon count is a little higher in this deck, but you'll see why, because the summons under wind and water are all really quite good. I'm going to start off with the wind cards first, and the wind forwards in this deck, there are very few of them, but that's because a lot of the wind forwards that are out at the moment are actually very underwhelming, especially if they aren't heroes or legend cards. So it's worth bearing in mind that, if you want to build wind, it's probably worth bearing in mind it's better as a support colour right now rather than a forerunner. But Riku is a part of this deck, and she is like your kill condition. She's one of them at least. She requires you to have either Pain or Yuna out for her to be particularly good. If you get both of them out, however, she becomes a 10k attacker with essentially hexproof. She can't be targeted by anything your opponent does. She's terrifying if you have both of them out. And that's even outside of the realms of this deck. If you want to build a deck with her, she can be horrible if you're willing to put the time and work into having her there. Pain also goes very, very well with her for obvious reasons, because the YRP thing is meant to be, that's the theme of this deck realistically. And Pain, if you have the other two out, has amazing enter the battlefield effects. When you play her, you draw a card if you have Yuna, and you activate 3 of your backups, which makes her free if you have Riku. Even if you only have one of them down, she's well worth playing straight away. She's very, very solid. And then rounding off the wind forwards, then Yuffie, I thought, would be a good fit here, because she's just a one-drop easy guy that you can start the game with, and you just start sort of chipping at your opponent's health before you go in for the kill with the bigger guys. Now the backups for wind are where the stars shine for wind, because there's so many good ones. In fact, there are so many wind backups here that I really wanted to put in, but there's just not enough room for them. But you feel free to let me know in the comments below if you think that there's something that I've missed. But I really wanted to put in Maria, because I think she's actually really, really good, because she boosts all of your forwards, not just your wind ones. And there's a couple of others as well that are also very, very strong. But with the ones that are here, I've gone with 3 copies of Brother, because you run the Searcher from the deck. You just do. It doesn't matter whether you're playing FF7, 10, 13. If there is a Searcher in your deck, you run 3 of it. And this card, gets almost every forward that you're playing out, and the ones that matter at the very least. You get your Rikus, you get your Tiduses, you get your Yunas, all sorts of things. You have to play 3 of this card. The next card down is Aerith, who is only a rare, which is uncommon in this game, which I swear confuses everybody, but she's unbelievably powerful. She's just, you're playing wind, you play this card. That's the issue with the wind backups, is they have too many good ones, which I wish they'd kind of transferred that over to the forwards, really. But Aerith is basically a free backup. She activates 3 of your backups when you play her, and she also has an amazing S effect, where you activate all of your forwards and give them all hexproof until the end of the turn. And the way that the stack works is very similar to Magic. So if your opponent tries to Odin one of your guys, then you can activate that in response, and it makes the Odin spell fizzle, so it doesn't do anything. So they've just wasted a card for nothing. That's amazing in this game. Then I'm playing 3 copies of Archer, because Minwu is a problem in this against most decks, and it's a card that a lot of people are complaining about. We're actually going to run a couple of copies in here because it's not that hard to find. But Archer, Dancer's next. Archer deals with a lot of problems that backups give you, and it's one of 3 cards in the game that deal with backups at all, so it's well worth picking this card up and playing 3 copies of it. And then rounding the backups off is a single copy of Dancer. Now, I actually wanted to put more copies of this card in, but as I said, there's very little room, and the other 3 cards are just that important that they have to be there. But you can combo this with various cards in the deck that make, so that you can do AoE damage across your opponent's board and like wipe their small guys clean. Dancer's actually a very good card in general, and it's very well worth considering for any deck, not just this one. And then we're moving on to the summons now, and I don't really like Alexander. I've stated it in a couple of decks in the past, like I'm running it in my Wind and Lightning deck, but I don't really like the card because there aren't enough guys that it kills to make it worth running copies of. With that said though, it does deal with a couple of things that, this deck doesn't particularly like Sephiroth. Which, you may be able to get copies of yourself one time, but at the moment, where we're trying to keep the prices of everything low, you're going to run 2 Alexander, although later down the line, he's probably the first thing that should go. 2 copies of Valor 4 from the starter deck are in this as well, mainly for its synergy with Dancer. Now, you can go Dancer to deal 1,000 to all of your opponent's guys, then Valor 4, as long as you control Yuna, you then deal 3 more 1,000 to all of your opponent's guys and activate all of your backups, including the Dancer you just played. So you then deal another 1,000 to all of your opponent's guys. And now you can see why I wanted to run more copies of Dancer. In all fairness, you could probably experiment with running the full set of Valor 4 and a 2nd or 3rd Dancer, so that you can get that combo of just wipe your opponent's board with 1 card just more frequently. It's a bit of a cute play as opposed to like a consistent one, but it's very powerful when it goes off. Now we're going to go into the water forwards, and to be honest, the first card that I put here, I didn't really like all that much when I first read him. He seemed like he relied too heavily on Yuna, and because it's better to run more copies of the backup Yuna as she's harder to kill than the forward one, then I wasn't sure about him. However, he's actually pretty solid, and that's Tidus, or Tidus, or however you want to pronounce it. I'm pretty sure it's Tidus, and I pronounce it wrong sometimes. But he's a 9k attacker with Brave, if you have Yuna. That's all you really need to care about, and he costs 1 less for every guy you have that's FF10 affiliated. So if you've got your Riku and your Pei now, he costs 4 for a 9k Brave attacker. That's stronger than even, 4-drop Light Cloud, and Light Cloud is obscenely powerful, so he's not an ignorable character. He doesn't do an awful lot else, but that's not bad. Having a 9k attacker that's just constantly poking your opponent. 9k is the highest printed value a card can have in this game right now. So he's just good. So I opted for 3 copies of him. I was originally only going to run 2, but I thought, actually, do you know what? He actually is very good, so I'm going to put the full set in. And also alongside him is 3 copies of Waka. Now, Waka is extremely powerful, actually, in the right hands. He's more of a control piece than an aggro piece. But when he's on the board, any card that's making it so your opponent doesn't want to attack you but might have to anyway is a good card. Now, so if he's sitting there and going, okay, I'm activated on the board, you want to attack me, I'll then block you and use my S effects here. You have 1k power and no abilities at all. That's really strong. He can also use that in response to your opponent playing a guy, so that you can cancel their ETB effects. He's one of the only sort of cancel effects in the game, and that's really strong. So he's got a full set. I'm running a single copy of mine. Now this you might want to take out. It's not the greatest card in the game. It's a standard unit. However, it has something that very few cards in this game have, which is consistent draw power. And draw power in this game, like any game, wins games. However, he does require a guy to go with him, but it's any guy because he can change his element at will. And, the party attack thing, it does break deadlocks. It's not something you use very frequently, but when you do use it, you do find yourself quite surprised by it. So I've opted for 1 copy, so it's definitely worth experimenting with him. If you don't like him, drop him for something else, like another Geomancer, another Yuffie, another backup if you want it. There's all sorts of things you can take him out for. Then 2 of the hero cards in this deck I've gone with are Cecil. And this is because Cecil wards your opponent's effects and summons to him rather than anything else. Now, I like this as a way of protecting Riku until she's built up properly, because you kind of want Riku down before you want Pain down, because then you get the extra stuff. But, you can also use it as a way of protecting Yuna, You can use it as a way of protecting all sorts of your cards. It's just good, and you know, he's a hero card for a reason, and he's worth looking at. And you'd probably run him later down the line when you get the combo variant of this, when you start loading in the legendary Tidus, because it protects him. I've then gone with 2 copies of Geomancer, which is just a solid pick because he draws a card when he dies. So he's definitely something that you'd probably want to pair up with the Mime so that you're going to draw whether he dies or doesn't. And it just seems like he's a decent card, but again, this is probably a card that you may want to take out later down the line, but it's worth noting that he has very good synergies with other cards in the game, so he is genuinely a very good card. And then rounding off the forwards, I've gone with a single copy of the starter deck Yuna. I really, really like this starter deck Yuna. However, because this deck is so reliant on Yuna coming out, it's a lot harder to kill the backup variant of Yuna than it is to kill the forward one. Because there's a lot more kill spells and damage dealers, things like that affect the forwards that don't affect the backups. However, I would like to see this Yuna played in a deck that doesn't rely on FF10 characters, or her specifically, because she generates card advantage. She's actually very, very powerful. Going into the water backups now, I've gone with 3 copies of the common Yuna because I think that she's the centerpiece of the deck. Her effect is not really relevant even, to be honest. She makes your Leviathans cost a little less, and that's nice. She doesn't make your Moogles cost 0, thank God, because that would be broken. But she's there because she makes Tidus active, she makes Riku active, she makes Pain slightly better. She's the centerpiece of the deck, and backups are a lot harder to destroy than forwards are, which is why we've gone with 3 copies of the backup and 1 copy of the forward. There's just no reason to not play as many Yunas as possible, but you don't want to clog the deck with her because none of the Yunas have S abilities, which is a little awkward. The next backup that I've gone with is 3 copies of the Geomancer backup. That's because this card is actually amazing, and I kind of didn't realise it until I started trying it out for myself. But there are so many utilities for this. Anyone who's played Magic knows how powerful Sensei's Divining Top was. Now don't get me wrong, this isn't quite that good, but the ability to at any time just go, at the end of your turn I'm going to look at the top card of your deck, top card of my deck, and see if there's a card that I actually want. If it's not, then it can go on the bottom. Or, better yet, in response to me about to take damage, I can go, I'll look at the top card of my deck and see if it's an EX Burst or not. That's an EX Burst, I'm going to leave that on the top. That's not one, it can go on the bottom. It's just, there's a lot of utility with it, and it's only a 2-drop. You know, that's definitely a card worth playing, so we're going to go with the full 3 of that. I'm then going to put my other 2 hero cards into at this point, and it's a card that's very controversial to some extent, and it's Minwu. Minwu is absurdly powerful. There's no 2 ways about it. I've seen people complaining that he needs to be banned already, which I think is a little overzealous. He's very, very good, but there are plenty of ways around him. He makes it so that your guys are a lot harder to kill. Riku, when she's fully powered, along this card, is practically impossible to kill. She's just unbelievably powerful. At that point, then you have your win condition, and then you just go in for the game, which is why there's more backups in this deck than forwards, or more backups than I usually play in my decks, because they're just, for water and wind, they're just really good. And then you have to run Yuna to kind of have this deck go around her. And then rounding off the water backups, I'm running 2 copies of Shuyin. This is primarily because it gets guys out of the way, but it's also mostly there because I want more EX Bursts in the deck, because EX Bursts in the game actually do benefit you quite a lot. Anyone who's played Vanguard knows that triggers, can turn a game around. Jill Nabat in the Ice decks can absolutely turn a game around at the last second. And Shuyin can do that, just not quite to the same extent, but he does have a really good effect. He's like a second Leviathan, and that's definitely a card worth running. And then going into the summons, there's 6 summons in this deck for water, and they're 2 very, very good cards. You just run them. There are 3 copies of Leviathan, which is made cheaper by your Yuna, so you're more than likely going to have Yuna out unless you're on a back foot. So it's a 2-drop bouncer guy. That's really, really solid. And if your opponent's aggroing you, and they hit you with one guy, and you turn this over for an EX Burst, you then bounce one of the other guys they control, so you're taking less damage. And that's what I mean by EX Bursts turning the game around. And then, possibly the best card in the game right now, 3 copies of Moogle. There's not many cards in this game that plus. Moogle doesn't even plus unless you take him as an EX Burst, at which point you just laugh. But he deck things. He filters your hand, he's draw 2, drop 1. He's the closest thing we have to Brainstorm in this game, and anyone who's played Magic knows how busted effects like that are, and it's no different here. If there's copies you have of guys you already have out, you drop them. If there's copies of cards you don't want in your hand, you drop them. It's just a very, very good card, and you definitely run 3 copies of this card in any water deck you're running. As I said before, the best way to improve on this deck is to kind of go with a combo variant that's running the legendary Tidus, whatever, and going off with just smacking your opponent's head in repeatedly with him at the last second while keeping your opponent's board under control with the various backups and summons you have under Wind and Water. Riku is still a decent win condition, and you still do base the deck around Yuna to some extent, but you want to try and make it so that she's not the only focus of the deck. Now, I'm not going to give you a deck list here because I think that the guys over at 6 Agents have given a deck list that I would have built anyway. So as I've said at the beginning of the video, check in the description box below and you can see a link to their video, and I think you should check that out for sure. So yeah, as always with these videos, I encourage you guys to share this out with somebody who's just bought the FF10 starter deck and doesn't really know what to do with it, or if you just want something sort of cheap and easy to build up from it, then definitely share this video to the people who might want to see it for that reason. And I encourage you guys who know the game a little bit better to definitely experiment with the starter decks, because they've actually got a lot of good cards in them, and I really think that there's a lot that you can do with them outside of just getting commons and rares, etc. But for the time being, I just wanted to make videos that new players could pick up and do some really awesome things with, that they could just get stuck into the game and just start playing it, because it's a good game and people should be playing it more. And as always, I'd like it if you guys subscribe to the channel, like the video, all that jazz that YouTubers do, and just share this stuff out, because I think this game is awesome and I really want you guys to start enjoying it as much as I do. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye now.